الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Welcome everybody to the Safina Society Nothing But Facts live stream on a Thursday in which I believe we're now officially in the winter because we got our first set of flurries today. Did you guys see that? It was 5 minutes, but given the past, we'll take it, right? So let's get straight into our issue because I hate and I despise long form introductions that drive the user crazy and you just keep hitting forward. Excuse me. We're brought to you by GRT, and while I read this, Omar will fire up our Halab, our winter, not Halab, not restricted to Halab, but it's our winter drive to make sure we're doing our part to help the Syrian people get through the winter. And as you see here, the title of this stream, the freedom fighters are halfway to Damascus. Now, that's controversial to say freedom fighters because some people believe that they're Qaeda ISIS rebels, and whom we don't support. But when I look at the people's reaction, people are celebrating down there. Now, that doesn't make something right or wrong, but it kind of tells me that they're not being mistreated and that they know who these people are. It seems that the truth of the matter, the closest thing to the truth, is that there are a lot of different people involved in these rebellions. Or I should say, this freedom fighting. It seems that there's a lot more than merely one party. And given the way that communication is so widespread these days, there are a lot of people celebrating with these alleged rebel soldiers as opposed to legit children of the nation. That's what it seems to be. That they are the children of the nation. They're just local Syrian people who got involved in these groups because there was maybe nothing else. And as I said earlier, it's not totally far-fetched to imagine that a group may begin very evil and will morph and break off and morph again and break off again. And then other groups are added to it. And then at the end, the result of that is a whole different thing, something that is palatable to you. So I want to read a couple of things here. The first piece of news is that these freedom fighters / rebels, based on your perspective, because I'm not jamming my view down anyone else's throat. Other things I will jam down people's throat, because if it's a qat'i doctrine, fact, that you can't entertain any other opinion. But this is not the case. People are free to have any opinion they want about these rebels / freedom fighters. And as we have from people like Bilal Abd al-Karim, I've been watching some of his videos, and other people like Tawqir Sharif, he says, it is mixed. It's really mixed. There cannot be one set statement. Things are mixed. Like Bilal Abd al-Karim is really against Jolani. And he thinks the guy is purely a rebel to be politician, had nothing to do with Islam. That's a big opinion. But then again, at the end of the day, what is it? It's an opinion. It's just epistemically, it's hearsay. Epistemically, I'm not saying he's lying. I'm just saying, where would I put that? Someone said that. That's it. We don't know in the man's heart what he is or isn't. Jolani. You know anything about Jolani? At least new viewers to this Syrian thing don't know anything about him. But let's take a look at this. Was very interesting is that Hama has been taken. And one of my sources of news is somebody that Assad supporters don't like. They don't like him at all. But I'm only judging by what I see. I can only judge by what I see. And I see that he's just putting out pieces of information, and he puts his evidence. And he says that Hama, which is, you go Aleppo, Hama, Damascus. Hama is halfway to Damascus, but you have to go a little bit to the west. And you know that what I'm about to say. Fire up a map for us, so we could see the where the cities of Syria are. The fall of Hama, Charles Lister says, this is the person I mentioned that I know the Assad supporters, they're not going to like him. But to me, I can only judge by what I see. I don't see any slants. I see him giving us some news here. And he's been covering Syria for 15 years. Why? Who knows? Who knows why these Westerners do these things, to be honest with you. You ever wonder about this, Omar? How? Maybe he married a Syrian woman. Who knows? Like, what is the motivation for somebody to study a country 7,000 miles away for the last 15 years of his life? Tell me, do you ever think about this? Like these people who study, let's say, expert in China, expert in Japan, expert in Brazil. Why? What is no person? There's got to be a personal motivation. I don't get it. I just don't get it. I never understood Islamicists. Guy, his whole career studying Islam. I know where it started. It started at SOAS, University of London, for the sake of colonizing. So I get that. I don't understand how someone ends up studying a religion that he doesn't believe in and has no family related to it. What's the motivation? I don't get it. But in any event, I'm not going to get into his personal life. I'm just throwing out my ta'ajjub on that. He says that the fall of Hama is going to accelerate developments elsewhere. As you can see on the map here, Halab is way up there. Aleppo. Halab, Latinized as Aleppo. Go down southwest to Hama. Let's get Damascus in the picture. Damascus is over south. Oh, it's not southeast. See, I don't even know my geography. It continues. So it is almost like a slanted straight line. I thought Damascus was inland a little bit more, so I thought it was more like an arrow shape. Yeah, like a wide shape, but it's not. It's actually Halab, Hama, Hims, Dimashq. Okay. It's one, what is that? It's the M5, so we have to have British names for our highways now. All right. Halab, Hama, Hims got to be next. Then they're marching down to Damascus. And as you can see, Lubnan comes up a little bit right next to Hims. Lubnan. And then Dimashq to Lubnan is nothing. That's like a very short drive from Dimashq to the borderline of Lebanon. Very short drive there. Okay. The Assad regime is falling very quickly. Charles Lister has a little article on this where we'll read in a second if I don't get paywalled on this. So I want to read this, but I also want to tell you guys and read about Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani. He said that we should expect, right? Imagine if Taliban came around and said, no, we are the Afghan National Party. Like, what are you guys saying? That's not you. You're an Islamic Hanafi Maturidi party, right? And they stuck with it. They're now the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, the Imara. Even they're accurate by fiqh. They're even accurate by fiqh, right? To call themselves an Imara, as opposed to like a Khilafa, which is ISIS, which is completely inaccurate because nobody made you the Khalifa. They're Imara. And the Shahada's there. And of course, I know everyone's going to say they don't treat women properly. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to assume your facts are correct. Fine. We can disagree with them on that and denounce that too, right? Omar's saying, no, it's not facts. Well, who knows what the facts are? I don't know. This program is called Nothing But Facts. Bring me qat'i evidence, and that's a fact. But you bring me hearsay, and some people said this, some people said that. I'm going to tell you, okay, if you're correct, our position is this. If these facts are correct, or if these statements are correct, then our position is that. How can we lose, right? So if they mistreat women, then we say to them, we support you in general, but we don't support you in specific. Not this specific issue. Fix it. Build some schools.
That argument is like
build a women's gym.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, they don't treat the women. Let's invade them and colonize them for the next 20 years.
That's what they're saying. Yeah, that's their argument. Over the past week, the future of Bashar al-Assad's regime has been placed squarely into question. A coalition of armed opposition factions has gone on the offensive in northern Syria, capturing some 250 cities, towns, villages. Text this person right here and ask him if he can come on the live stream right now. Yeah. No, it's Danish Farouqi. Syria's second largest city of Halab was captured in 24 hours. Right. So they got a coalition of armed opposition factions has gone on the offensive in northern Syria, capturing some 250 cities, towns, and villages. The second largest city in Syria, I didn't know this, was Halab. And they captured that in 24 hours. As Syrian regime front lines collapse one after another, after nearly 5 years of territorial lines of control being frozen in the country, these are dramatic, game-changing developments. For years, conventional wisdom on Syria had held that the crisis there was frozen, with hostilities a thing of the past, and Assad's regime the inevitable victor. With that, international attention waned, Syria-focused diplomacy ended, and governments gradually divested resources away from policy aimed at Syria and onto other global challenges. Meanwhile, as conditions in Syria festered, Arab governments took the step to collectively re-engage Assad, beginning in 2023, effectively normalizing his status across the Middle East. For policymakers in the U.S., the fact that regional actors appear to be taking charge of the Syria file was an encouraging sign and a source of relief. More recently, driven by opposition to the EU's policy of isolating Assad and believing he consolidated his victory, 10 European states, led by Italy, joined forces to seek to re-engage Assad's regime. So he was really on his way to legitimacy. And it looks like that's all this newspaper is this magazine is going to give us. Let's see. Yeah, they're not going to give us more. It's just there's a paywall here, so forget that. Okay, let's continue reading. Charles Lister has been working for full time on Syria since the crisis began 14 years ago. Okay. There really is no understanding of how remarkable the losses imposed on Assad's regime have been over the past week, and a large reason, the biggest reason for this, lies with HTS. So he has a Twitter thread, hopefully pretty much his article, and let's read. Yalla, load up already. Okay. Militarily, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, has invested enormously since 2020 in enhancing combat capabilities, improving professionalism, tightening its structure and command and control. From an officer class to special forces, nighttime units, and an entire drone force, it changed the game. The expansion of units like Asa'ib al-Hamra and introduction of Saray al-Harari and Kata'ib Shaheen, along with large-scale indigenous rocket and missile production, means they're producing them at home, Syria First policy, has created a force that Assad's regime has seriously struggled to defend against, let alone outmaneuver. But just as significant as military capabilities is the groundwork HTS has done to facilitate its advance. Years of engagement with tribes, minority notables, and other social bodies that exist beyond Greater Idlib. This has been crucial. Having spent 4+ years engaged in sensitive community engagement and with groups traditionally hostile to the likes of HTS, the group has developed a knack for diplomacy. In recent days, it's put this experience to work on multiple fronts to significant effect. In areas of northern Hama, for example, HTS has negotiated intensively with Ismaili notables, with Assad regime military commanders, and with Sunni tribes, most resulting in peaceful takeovers, safe exits, and some publicly acknowledged regime defections. In the Kurdish area of Halab, HTS's line of communication with the SDF, remember what we said, we talked about these groups the other day, the SDF being the Syrian Defense Force or whatever they are, they're the Marxist Kurds. They're different from their brethren, Sunni Muslim Kurds. If I'm not mistaken, Kurds are all Sunni. However, this group, this leadership they're the Marxists. And that explains why when you divide up Syria into Sunnis, Shi'is, and Kurds, you notice the Kurd part there doesn't make sense. But really it would be Sunni, Arab Sunnis, Arab Shi'is, and Kurdish atheists. Because Marxists tend to be atheists. We could just say Marxists to be safe. But who knows if this group would ever, if the majority of Kurds are Sunnis, that would tilt the balance. But in any event, the Arab Sunnis would have a dotted line to Turkey. The Arab Shi'is would have a dotted line to Iran. The Kurds, Marxist Kurds, would have a dotted line to the Americans. Okay? And that's what would happen. In the Kurdish areas of Aleppo, that communication has been pragmatic, constructive, and effective. Now then, there's the SNA. Remember, that's the Turkish group. Yeah, the Syrian National Alliance, the Turkish-funded group. Brief attempts at negotiation, on the other hand, rapidly devolved into threats and then fighting. In multiple areas of Halab, long held by Assad, local community elders have called on HTS to deploy forces to their areas and intervene against SNA abuses, threats, and criminal behavior, and to get working on repairs and service distribution. Don't underestimate the significance of HTS's recent statements and rhetoric towards Christians, Alawites, Kurds. They cannot merely be PR, as it sets an irreversible precedent. Jolani has spent years purging those who'd critique such steps. He's walking stabler ground now. And he has here a press release of Jolani basically telling his forces and announcing to the minority groups their safety. Because, of course, ISIS, their whole reputation was the exact opposite of all this. Okay. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham has also invested heavily in its semi-technocratic Salvation government, which comprises 11 ministries and many other public sector service bodies. The SSG, what is SSG again? Syrian Socialist Guard or something? Operates closely with external aid and international non-government organizations, and the U.S. and the UN has a permanent office liaisoning with the SSG in Idlib. Someone find out the SSG exactly so we don't mess that up. The SSG has sought to replicate the conventional acts of sovereign government, running a census, issuing ID, I love this, issuing ID cards, running and regulating banks, they're walking the walk, basically. Syrian Salvation Government, and what's their angle? What are they? Are they the local Syrian?
It's a quasi-state, so they're sort of operating in the vacuum in these areas that aren't ruled by the...
And what group are they? Where did they originate out of? Just locals? They come out of HTS. Okay. Start acting like the government, and you'll eventually probably be the government. Start walking the walk. No one's going to hand you rule on a plate. Some will dismiss HTS and the SSG's early proto-governance steps in Aleppo as superficial. But after 14 years of debilitating humanitarian crisis and Assad's corruption and economic decline, first impressions could count for a lot in defining what comes next. I love this. A group just comes around and starts taking the census and issuing ID cards. Do you guys know, as a comic relief here, there used to be a group called Hizb Takfir, Jama'at at-Takfir wal-Hijra. The group that makes takfir and migration, right? And comedy, I'm telling you. And these guys took over a little village in south of Egypt at one point. And they started walking around, knocking on Christians' door, collecting the jizya. And you know that when that problem that happened when the U.S. left, like they accidentally transferred a couple $100 million to the Taliban bank account, right? And some guy online, he had a great sense of humor. He said, "First jizya payment." By the way, jizya is the money that people of the book who non-Muslims, when they live under Muslim rule. Okay, Omar, don't forget to don't give me a haircut again. When they don't serve in the army, and the Muslim army has to protect them, the government has to protect them. So instead of serving in the army, they pay a jizya, and it's also something where they're recommended for them to hate it so much that they enter Islam because of it. So get out of paying the jizya. That's one of the wisdoms they say, not the legal reason, but the wisdoms. This is not even it's not a lot of money. It's a very small amount of money. Okay. But in any event, for context, in past years, HTS and Jabhat al-Nusra before it, and remember in the evolution of all these things, HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or the Organization for Freeing Syria, was Jabhat al-Nusra, which is the angle, or the Jabha, I guess would be like the basically victory party or whatever. Jabha is not a party, it's just like an angle. Struggled to achieve genuine trust with the rest of Syria's armed opposition, but that's changed in recent years. The impressively tight coordination with long-standing FSA-branded groups this past week is evidence of that. We need a qamus. There needs to be an encyclopedia of these terms. FSA, SFF. By the way, for you to know, Omar, if you want to put this up, the freedom fighters of Syria have reversed the colors of the green and red. Their flag has a green stripe at the top rather than the red stripe at the top. If you want to employ that in your, yeah, there you go. That's it. That is the new Syrian flag. Yeah, green and red has just been swapped. They just swapped it, and they added a color. They added a star. Sorry. What does the third star stand for? Who knows? But maybe someone would know. But beyond military coordination, the so far smooth transition from battle to consolidation to interim governance, particularly in Halab, has seen HTS devolve authority to more locally rooted factions, like Jabhat al-Shamiyya, al-Zinki, etc. at all. The relatively sophisticated PR effort and swift pivot from military to governing is already having some effect. You know, some people have a orientalized mind, and they're like, this sounds sophisticated. It sounds like they know what they're doing. Therefore, must be the Zionist influence, right? You have an Orientalist mind or what? What, you don't think they have brains? Now, I'll tell you what I thought. I always felt that ISIS came totally out of nowhere and had better videos than Hollywood. And that was fishy to me. Like, that didn't make any sense, right? And also, ISIS never once, ever tried to say anything about the Zionists. So I think a lot, and we all know for fact that the U.S. government propped up ISIS and gave them money, which is why Trump said that thing, Obama is the founder of ISIS. Well, that's obviously the exaggerated form of saying they sent them money. And there are emails for that. They're like, that's proven. That's not even a fact. It's not even a speculation that the U.S. at some point was funding ISIS to knock off whoever they wanted to knock off. The relatively sophisticated PR and swift pivot it's having effect. Aleppo's hospitals are fully staffed. The city police and defected soldiers are signing up to join the SSG's interior ministry payroll. So they have their little, even their government divided up.
Taking over institutions.
And they're acting like an institution, right? With positions and making sure the water is running and people have ID cards and the census is running and stuff like that.
Attaining legitimacy.
Yeah. Speak.
These guys have their own West Point, their own Sandhurst.
Oh, they have their own
Military academy.
SSG or HTS have a military academy.
So SSG and HTS, same thing?
He's using them differently, but I think HTS wants to become just SSG.
No, so I just did some reading on it. So SSG is sort of the umbrella organization. HTS is just the name of their military. So
Military component.
for the last 7 years now, SSG is what they've sort of identified themselves at.
Say it again. Wait, repeat this whole thing.
So SSG, starting in 2017, was formed.
SSG's formed in 2017. Okay.
Became the governing umbrella for this part of Syria that
Okay.
was taken over by HTS.
Okay.
HTS became the military wing of the SSG.
So they work together.
Exactly. So HTS falls under
It's a
SSG.
part of
So
SSG.
SSG governs HTS. HTS is just the name of their military.
Oh, okay.
And SSG has a bunch of different ministries. They've got public services. They've got a war college.
So Jolani is just the head of
The military wing.
military component, not the actual SSG.
Yeah.
Who's the lead of that?
Yeah, we need to know the names. Who and secondly, this really reminds me of the Irgun, where Israel was founded much similar to this, where the British had not officially given them anything, right? But they started to act like they were ruling, and they had a terrorist wings, terrorizing the Palestinians and protecting the Jews, and these militias eventually evolved into Israel. Yep.
So Jelani was their first emir, but now they have
Of the SSG.
Of SSG. But now they have a prime minister and a president. So their president is Mustafa al-Musa, and their prime minister is Mohammed al-Bashir.
Can you give me the bio of that of Al Musa?
Click in. Which one? The president?
Open up Timur's mic so that we can hear Fat. Yeah, let's hear the president. Like, is he just a general Syrian guy? Is he a socialist? Is he Qaeda, ISIS?
It seems like a theme in Syria. These guys are doctors or pharmacists. So Mustafa al-Musa is a politician, pharmacist, and a member of HTS. Mashallah.
He's just like a regular Syrian guy.
Regular Syrian guy decided to fight. I like this.
Even Zawahiri was like a physicist.
Who?
Zawahiri.
Yeah, Zawahiri. Yeah.
So he's the president. They don't say much about him. He's the president of the Shura Council, and he was previously the head of their health committee.
So he's not ISIS or anything like that.
It depends on how they label him, right? So if they say everyone who's HTS, the
Yeah.
bucket labeling, right? So I don't know, but not here. It doesn't say anything about him being ISIS, but with a name like that, he's definitely on a list.
Oh, for sure. But at least he has a first name and a last name.
Yeah.
Enough with these ISIS names,
Yeah.
right? Like Abu this, and kunya and a laqab, or a kunya and like a city name or country name, where you're an anon basically.
Yeah.
But this guy's like legit. Like if tomorrow they turned around and said, okay, Damascus has fallen. Former pharmacist, Muhammad, whatever his name is now the president of Syria. It's not going to send ripple effects. He's a pharmacist, right? Or whatever he was.
We've got a lot more on the prime minister. So Mohammed al-Bashir, he is an engineer, and he became the prime minister in January of this year. He's 40 years old. He went to the University of Aleppo and Idlib University. He used to work at the Syrian gas company, worked on precision instruments. He also has a degree in Sharia from Idlib.
So we got a pharmacist and we have an engineer. All Muslims should, so it looks like the local masjid board, right? The lights will be on. You can't expect more, right? Don't expect too much, but the lights will be on, right? The doors will be open. Yeah. It seems like, I can't make a judgment, but it sounds to me these are just the locals.
But it's not a bunch of quacks, right? Like
It's not a bunch of quacks, that's it. And it's not someone with an ISIS name, right? Everyone's got what's your ISIS name? We'll call you Ibn Abi Taymur al-Tinaki, right? Right? Okay. Ibn Abi Omar al-Queenzi from Queens. It's your ISIS names. Enough with these ISIS names. They're Anans. This is actually will give people much relaxation. Khalas, it's like, I get that. A pharmacist and an engineer. In many ways, with a heavy dose of irony, HTS today is the realization of a vision first put forward by Ahrar al-Sham, whose first generation leaders sought to pursue an evolution from Salafi jihad to revolutionary nationalism. Nationalism? That doesn't make any sense. Ahrar's decline was HTS's doing. Ahrar al-Sham, another group in this long list of, it's almost like a virus that keeps mutating. Ahrar al-Sham was the first such group to embrace the green revolutionary flag, which we talked about earlier, the swapping the colors and adding a star, and to adopt nationalistic rhetoric, to publicly critique the influence of external jihad factors. Well, if by nationalism they mean by that just focusing on getting our cities together, that's acceptable. If it's the belief that the nation is what's most important, that's going to be a problem. But I don't think that these guys are getting that deep into the philosophy of things. They're probably just mean by it, let's just clean up our house first, right? Look at everyone on in the comments putting their ISIS names on, right? Here's Ibn Umar al-Turanti, all sorts of Anans. Ibn Abi Rashid al-Kandahlawi, okay? Ibn Abi Rayyan al-Brunswicki. Anans, ISIS names. By the way, my ISIS name is actual person, and he's on a list. I think he's been killed though. Yeah, Abu Ayyub al-Masri he's been killed. Yeah, he's been killed. So I like this idea of these people. Give me your name. Just say your name.
It's gonna become a meme.
Give me your name. Have so the guy's a pharmacist. Half of these ISIS kids are dropouts, if not all of them. They're Anans on the earth completely. Like, they have no record. Ex-drug dealers, ex-prisoners, ex-failures in life, etc., etc., etc. But at least this guy, he's a pharmacist. So that means, exactly. Thank you. That's the best summary. His parents are proud. Show me one ISIS kid. And I'm generalizing here, but that's the general reputation that you guys got. A bunch of failures, right? No white-haired, mature people who we know where they came from out of society, who made their parents proud at some point in life. No, these is all just, as that hadith, you know, that famous hadith, which Shaykh Abdul Karim referred to yesterday, which was from, what was the book that we were referring to? The famous hadith book that he was Bukhari's teacher. I can't remember what it's called. But, No, he was Bukhari's teacher, but his book has a lot of weak hadiths about the end of time. What's his name? SubhanAllah, I can't believe I forgot his name. No. But it's criticized, but he's saying, like, why are you worried about the chain? We see the event right in front of us. And that hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that talked about people, this group that's claiming to have a state, people will travel to them, and their people will be basically rabble. They're not of any import. They are not of any achievement. They speak great words, but their hearts are like rocks, right? And we have I have a slideshow on that as proofs of prophethood. That is a prophecy. That is so true, right? They have long hair like women. Their names are Ebu, and their last name is a city name, right? So it's an amazing proof of prophethood, that ISIS one. But I just can't, the name is, I'm sure somebody here can remember. It's a well-known book. It's just the only problem, it's that it has very weak hadiths in it. And weak hadith are very dangerous on the end of time. Because if the opposite happens, you've actually shown the prophet to be incorrect. So Imam Ahmed warned severely against using weak hadiths for the end of time. So you don't want to show your prophet. Look at all these people put in their ISIS names. Ibn Faris, Dimashqi. Okay, here we go. Ahrar al-Sham was the first such group to embrace the green revolutionary flag and this nationalistic rhetoric and publicly critique these external jihadis. By the way, we're not against jihad. We're just for it properly. Where is the ASJ? Ahl Sunnah Jihad Brigade. Where is it? We need it.
So
Yeah.
in the United States, you can form associations, you can form militias, as long as you're not doing anything that's illegal.
You can form militias.
Benjamin Franklin formed his own militia. He went to the state assembly. This was back in the colonial period. He said, if you guys don't want to form a militia where our rights aren't being protected or
Yeah.
we don't feel safe, we're going to form a citizens association and serve as a militia. Then he went to another state. He bought some cannons.
Yeah.
And that was it. They set up a militia. They didn't need it, but they had it.
Hey, listen, if it's legal, why can't I act upon my legal rights, right? Let me go to my local mayor, my local congressman, tell him up front, hey, this is what I'm going to do, right? Yeah, they'll cook stuff up, and you'll get strangers sign up who are, of course, feds. Say, fine, we're not doing anything illegal. We're not even talking about jihad, right? ASJ, Ashari, Sufi Jihad Brigade, that's what someone's saying there. Yeah, well, good for them, right? Listen, I'm of the belief, I believe that something is correct, most correct, best opinion, truth, etc. But I actually, personal belief is that in the end of time, none of these groups will dominate over anybody else. And Sayyidina Imam al-Mahdi will come and just unify them all. That's my personal belief, right? None of these, it's never going to happen that, oh, we're going to bring the heyday back and dominate the ummah again. That's not going to happen. And we'll be the best in the ummah. No one will ever be against us. That will not happen. Every single group out there will continue to exist. No one will dominate over the other. You need like literal imperial wealth and imperial power over legal authority, over the citizenry, to slowly weed out a certain view that you don't like and prop up another view that you do like. I believe that one thing is true. One thing is more true than something else, and something else is false. But I don't believe that ever again one of these groups will dominate the whole ummah. What's going to happen is you learn to live together. Everyone do the best you can in promoting Islam. Don't knock each other down. And when Imam al-Mahdi comes, there's going to be a qawlun fasl. You will all have one mujtahid imam. Right? And probably you'll be too busy saving your life to ask him who was right. And maybe he will say, maybe he won't say certain things. But in the end of the day, Imam al-Mahdi clears house, clears the slate on these groups. That's an Aqeedah point. It's a secondary Aqeedah point. If someone doesn't believe in Imam al-Mahdi, Allahu A'lam, maybe that is a bid'ah in itself, sinful in himself to reject that concept. But I don't even think that removes you out of Ahl Sunnah. Rejecting Sayyidina Isa bin Maryam is returned. That removes you from Ahl Sunnah. So that's different. Okay? So I personally believe, and many Sunni Muslims believe in Imam al-Mahdi. He's going to end all these groups, even Shi'i and Sunni. He brings it to an end. And they say, well, how when he's from al-Hasan, and the Shi'is believe he's from al-Hussein, and even some scholars have already discussed this. They say there's no, just because he's from the lineage of al-Hasan doesn't mean his mother can't be from Hussein, right? He could be from Hassan on one side and Hussein from the mom's side. So his grandfather is from Hussein. Allah knows best, right? But we believe it's a secondary Aqeedah point that he will unify all the groups. There will be no more groups. In Aqeedah, in Sharia fiqh, in nation states. As we said earlier, all these lines, dotted lines. Local area only. And you have one leader. When Sayyidina Isa comes back, he further consolidates by taking Ahl al-Kitab and showing them, here, I am your Messiah that you've been waiting for, and I'm here to affirm Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Islam, and the Quran. And therefore, after fighting the Antichrist, will bring an end to Judaism and Christianity. There will be no, within his lifetime, as the Quran states and prophecies, وَإِن مِّنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا لَيُؤْمِنَنَّ بِهِ قَبْلَ مَوْتِهِ is a reference to Sayyidina Isa ibn Maryam. وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يَكُونُ عَلَيْهِمْ شَهِيدًا, because the majority of Jews and Christians rejected him, and only a few minority, end of time, will have accepted him properly. When I say Jews and Christians rejected him, meaning rejected, we know the Jews rejected him, but the Christians rejected the truth about him, that he's a prophet, not God, not the Son of God. That's why it says alayhim, because the majority he will testify against them, and the minority will be with him. Right? The minority meaning those who he meets at the end of time. You have an unstoppable ummah at that point. You have an ummah that's unified before Sayyidina Isa gets here. Then with that unified force, a couple year overlap between Sayyidina al-Mahdi and Sayyidina Isa. Then he unifies the Abrahamic, those who attribute themselves back to Abraham falsely or correctly, Islam being correctly and the other two falsely, unifies them. Then who stands in front of us at that point, in front of the truth? And who's going to stand in front of him? Nobody, except one group that no one can reason with. And that's Gog and Magog, Ya'juj and Ma'juj. Ya'juj and Ma'juj. And at that point, everyone has to head for the hills because no one can stop them. No one can reason with these people. No one can stop them. Who knows what language they speak. Can't even talk to them. Let's continue. The big test going forward is to what extent Hayat Tahrir al-Sham strides in northwest Syria can earn its acceptance, trust, or credibility from communities and actors deeper in Syria. Hama is another testing ground, and then after that, it's Homs. And the story isn't over yet, okay? Because after Homs, when you gather personnel from Halab to Hama to Hims, which translates in English as Homs, then when you get to Damascus, it's game over because you're going to outnumber them. And of course, at this point, I believe that Turkey will have really been involved because they really want to have a say in things. Okay. In 6 days, Syria's armed opposition has captured 237 cities, towns, and villages. Let's go to this section. I told you before I want to see this part on dissolving Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. And by the way, why is Hama important? Because Bashar al-Assad's dad, Hafiz, his father, massacred 40,000 Muslims in 1982. In an era before the camera and the technology spread so that you could document this. But there were no pictures in the same way that we have it today. Well, to show you how bad these Baa'thists are, these are a bunch of atheists. They wrote on a wall, "There is no God but the nation and no messenger but the party." That's how bad the Marxists are in the Arab world. These people are avowed atheists. Bilal Abd al-Karim says Hama has fallen to rebel forces. Assad army said that they withdrew to protect the civilians. He says, what a joke. Okay. Jolani has decided to abandon his radical path, says Mazen Hassoun. Today he appeared at the historic Aleppo citadel, confirming he is still alive, although we all assumed as much. Speaking to Crisis Group, I don't know who that is, so many groups, he stated that Aleppo will be governed by a transitional body and that HTS is considering dissolving itself to enable the full consolidation of civilian and military structures. Civilian and military structures into new institutions reflecting the diversity of Syrian society. Additionally, there were 3 reassuring statements today directed towards Christians, Alawites, and the international community. The real test of his commitment to change will lie in the governance of Aleppo, Salamiya, which is Ismailis, Muharda, Christians and how his fighters will enter these two cities. Okay. We'll see. We'll see. We shall see. Let's read. Ibn Abi Tariq had a nice little piece here, and it's not pro-Israel to hate Bashar al-Assad, and arguing otherwise exposes your sectarianism. You cannot justify Assad's massacre of Sunnis by pretending it's a necessary cost to maintain the resistance against Israel. Syria's fake resistance of Israel has been exposed since day one. Assad uses it as a scare tactic to legitimize his tyrannical view. Oh, Omar, are you going to take a final exam? A midterm? In what subject? Discrete math. So you have to do math in hiding or what? Okay. All right, muwaffaq. Allah give you tawfiq in your midterm exam. Assad uses this as a scare tactic to legitimize his tyrannical rule. Okay, that's a claim. Reducing Syria to a battleground for Zionists versus anti-Zionists is ahistorical. The blood of Syrians is worthy of protecting and speaking out for, regardless of any other conflict. This whataboutery, or this line that many people use, that we're suffering a genocide in Gaza, therefore shut up on what you're saying because I don't like what you're saying. That's essentially the idea, right? That's the idea. As Taimur takes his debut at the helm, he comes in, backup quarterback is coming in for his first. He's in the seat. He's in the driver's seat. But it's a what's the word? Manipulation tactic. It's a silencing tactic. We're having a genocide, so shut up. It's a manipulation tactic. Come sit here so we can hear what you're saying. And I was at the receiving end of this manipulation and silencing tactic when I spoke out against perennialism being preached here in North Jersey. On principle, I can't accept it. I don't care if 200 people listen to the khutbah. On principle, I won't stop. And of course, he wasn't coming from a perennialist. He was coming from a completely modernist Muhammad Abdu approach, right? And today, Sheikh Hamza Maqbool got wind of it after researching Islamic Relief's Zakat committee and wanting to see the biographies on them because he didn't like some of the things they do for Zakat. Not that he didn't like, he found it completely invalid, right? And we can talk about that another time, but the silencing tactic, we have a genocide in Gaza. Really? Do you know how many other things are going on that people are doing in their little worlds or their little spheres or big spheres while a genocide? So because a genocide is happening, so we should allow bad things to continue because a genocide is happening. How does it make any sense? You gonna say something?
Yeah, I think it's unfair to force everybody to have some sort of big picture mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I think we sit here reading the national news, which is all macro. It's not micro, right? And you have to look at it from that perspective. If we're thinking about even our own political situation, you think about local politics most of the time. You're not thinking about national politics, or you care about whether you're going to be able to park in a specific location or not, or whether you're going to have the right to send your kids to school. When you think about the folks in Syria and what they're doing, it's not their job on the first, in their first go around to go and worry about what's going on far away from them. They have to take care of their own situation first. And so it's not a fair metric to say that, okay, because something bad is happening 300 miles away, you can't take care of the bad thing that's happening to you in your own house.
Thank you. Common sense.
Common sense.
The correct analysis here would be, don't harm the resistance fighters. Don't do anything that would hurt the resistance fighters. Our unity right here. Let's say we're three of us in this room, or 300 of us in New Jersey, or 3,000 of us in New Jersey, or 30,000 Muslims in America, or 3 million in the Western Hemisphere. Has our unity impacted anything? Probably. Maybe the maximum was that we got national attention by retweeting and reposting and re-TikToking and all that stuff, right? That's it. You didn't stop Netanyahu. So don't also overestimate the power of, or the alleged unity. Secondly, alleged unity on what basis? We're not coming at it from a secular basis. We're coming at it from an Islamic basis. Therefore, if the Islam is my foundation and we're together fighting in opposition, but I find you hacking away, accidentally or not, at our foundation, I have to stop you before I continue. Right?
The other thing is, even if you do look at this big picture view and you see HTS somehow makes its way all the way to southern Syria, now HTS has a shared border with the biggest enemy we all have as Muslims, right? With Israel, the genociders. And so now, let's say 3 months from now, you've got a Syria that's controlled by HTS.
Yeah.
And you've got Lebanon, you've got the resistance there, you've got the resistance in Gaza. Now you're looking at a 3-front war for these people who can't win on one front, right? There's a big picture argument to say that these guys are doing the right thing too. And none of this is looking at the micro, right? In the micro, maybe their actions are incorrect, maybe they're going against something else. That is for someone like you to judge, not for me. But I'm saying if you look at it just from the political perspective, even that, there's 10 different interpretations there that could give them a justification from the political perspective. And so it's important not to, you're not there. None of us are there, right? So you've got to trust that if these are righteous people and they pray and they follow the religion correctly, that they're going to make their own judgments on these matters and make the decisions. And we should make our decisions here. We should be acting in our own sphere. What are we doing here when our kids are going to school and learning about transgenderism, right? Like we are failing on our own home front, and then we're judging people on their matters.
We're also taking the autonomy out of their hands and basically saying that, and almost giving omnipotence to Israel. Like there can't be anything positively, remotely good, except it's a puppet thing. That's also part of the problem of defeatism can creep in to messianism. Messianism, this concept that we're gonna just wait, the Mahdi's coming. Everything has to be so bad when the Mahdi arrives, because the Prophet ﷺ said that the whole world will be covered in darkness. That doesn't mean that there won't be exceptional pockets of truth and that it will be gaining momentum, right? That doesn't mean that at all. So messianism is a very big problem. And we talked about messianism. There are problems that come along to religious people regarding messianism, and that's one of them. The second one that Shaykh Abdul Karim talked about was tajammud, or ta'assub, I should say, to matters of opinion. And trust me when I tell you, in human history, it's just a historical fact, when a group reaches a peak and then it comes down, it never comes up again. It could come up a little bit, but it never really comes up again in the same way. So the way that the Islamic Ummah was in the past, the givens, these things will never dominate again. They could be strong, they could be influential, but they will never be domineering. And I can't remember when I said this some while back. You're going to live with these groups. We're going to live together, whether we like it or not, in the same areas, in the same masajid, in the same ummah, at Hajj. You might as well learn and find a way to coexist peacefully. Because let's be practical. We're not changing these lines of these theological lines, but so learn to differ without being destructive. Syria's fake resistance has been exposed since day one. He said the blood of Syrians is worthy of protecting and speaking out for, regardless of any other conflict. It is true that instability in the region benefits Israel, but the so-called stability that Assad brings, in quotes, is one that is only stable for himself and his allies. 12 million Syrians are displaced. I hope they go back home. I'm not saying that. Let me rephrase that. I hope they have the ability to go back to their homes. It's not like you're saying I would go back home. Sounded rude, but you know what I mean. Their lives have been really unstable for over a decade. How is that helping them? Pro-Iran, pro-Russia, pro-Assad. I would really love to see a movement, a wave where the Syrian people can go back home to their home. You don't ever want to be an immigrant, right? It's just, you have a separation in your mind. and you're never connected to the country that you're in, and then your children grow up a different nationality almost, right, than you are, even though you share the same ethnic heritage, but there's never a smooth transition between the immigrant kids and the immigrant parents. It's a rough transition. They don't share the same culture. The butcher of Syria will never be the savior of the Palestinians. That's a great line. Pro-Iran, pro-Russia, pro-Assad pundits want you to believe that Syrian lives are secondary to the Palestinians and that Palestinian lives can only be saved if Assad continues to slaughter and oppress Syrians. Butcher of Syria will never be the savior of Palestine. Believe me, he and his father both had the opportunity to prove otherwise. Assad is comfortable with the Zionist entity so long as he gets his piece of the pie. He said, discard the clip with Yahya Sinwar as an argument. We have no need to make political or strategic compromises. We can stand by our own morality. The blood of every Muslim is more sacred than the Kaaba, and we stand against anyone who belittles that. And do not pretend that we're the sectarians. Assad is the king of sectarian violence. And those who have the audacity to weaponize that claim against the victims of genocide in Syria should be ashamed. Okay. Mu'taz Sayyid Hamza says, Assad is a traitor and a Zionist asset. He and his brother sold the Golan Heights for $100 million, deposited in a Swiss bank, after which they withdrew the Syrian army from the Golan and allowed the Zionists' IDF to move in without a single shot fired. Claims, again, don't know what the proof is, it's a claim, just to give you that piece of information. We have nothing but facts here. Nothing but facts. I really like our view. It's just we're focused a lot on kalam and epistemology here, so knowing what's hearsay and what's fact. Okay? We didn't do any Q&A, I don't think, did we? Right? I'm watching this clip that someone put here about zoos. Someone's just sent me this clip. Yeah, trapping certain animals is really bad, I have to say. Trapping certain animals. I can't say all zoos are forbidden. For example, peacocks, donkeys, mules, these things can be domesticated, but wild animals that are meant to be free. You know, even in our Sharia, a dog. You can't trap a dog. These New York apartments and Zootopia, poor dogs are trapped. What's that movie that all the kids watch? Zootopia, where all these it's in New York and all these dogs are trapped. You're not allowed to do that. Anyway, that's a little tangent because someone just sent me that. Let's see what is the latest on the issue. Then we'll go to Q&A. We haven't done Q&A in a long time. The problem with many on the anti-imperialist left is they refuse to accept Arabs and Muslims have agency. Didn't we just say this? They refuse to accept this idea that a Muslim could think of something smart to do, right? Oh, if it looks professional and it looks good, it's got to be Western agents there. They see the world through the lens where the all-powerful USA and NATO and the Zionists are behind every uprising and revolution. Let's go to the Q&A here. If someone from the UK wanted to find a spiritual guide, who should they go to? Should they go to Sheikh Asrar Rashid? They can. Or they could go to Liverpool and find Sheikh Ibrahim Osiafa, or Bradford, Mustafa Mount, and they will connect you to the Habaib, Al-Habib Omar bin Salim bin Hafid. Sheikh Muhammad al-Yaqubi's group is there. And there are many, many other people who can be murabbis, basic spiritual upbringing, which is basically learning Aqeedah and learning fiqh as a prerequisite. Then applying them, getting support to apply them, but most important, encouragement in dhikr and mentorship in doing dhikr. That's what we mean by spiritual guide. Someone, a group, you have a set of brothers, you have a set of friends, a group, formal, informal, whatever, but you really encourage each other to do dhikr a lot and to study the diseases of the heart and to emphasize it and to think about it. It's the spirit of our religion, the heart. It's not the totality of the religion. It's the spirit of the religion. Did you see all the comments criticizing your original Pakistan episode that you did? Yeah, I saw that. But what's the update on Pakistan? Taimur, you're Pakistani. Do you follow Pakistani politics?
I don't have an update.
What's the status on it? No update?
It's still going on, the chaos. Imran Khan's still in prison.
Imran Khan is still in jail. And of course, you know, like, I can't really choose sides here because,
Choose Imran Khan.
yeah, my mind wants to choose Imran Khan. But, you know, some of our local elders will get on my case if I do that, and they're going to give me an earful every time I go pray in the masjid. But, you know, again, the whole country is for him except for some elites and the military elites, and also, but also it's again a case of all sorts of information coming on both sides. He did this bad and he did this good. How am I supposed to know what's what? But yeah. So I don't have much to say really about it, except that may Allah give Jannah and forgive those who died at the 200 people who died in the protest. Is your mic on?
There's an interview with him and Hamza Yusuf. I can send you the link.
Yeah, I remember that. Do I go to RIS or ISNA? Nah, I don't really go to conferences for a couple reasons. There's ICNA, there's Pearls of the Quran. I support them all, like morally, in terms of intent and morale, but I don't necessarily go to these. And the reason was that when I have time off, I want to take, I don't know, my kids they're in Islamic schools, they're in the masjid all the time. So when we have time off, I like to go somewhere else, completely away from this. Secondly, I don't see the utility of 20,000 speakers. If there are going to be 15 speakers a day, what's the point? No one's going to remember anything, right? So I don't find much utility for myself in going there. There's good speakers there, khalas, they're speaking. I mean, some of them on ideological basis, probably maybe all of them on ideological basis. I'm not going to be invited to go to these places anyway. Let alone if I did, I probably would turn it down anyway. Is it Tahawi Creed sufficient for Sunni unity? Should be. But there are also our interpretations. Mihrag Faisal says, what do you think of the drug addiction of Ashari refutation? Most of them probably are misquoting what the Ashari Aqeedah actually is. Okay, on zoos, what do you mean on zoos? Trapping wild animals is unlawful in our religion. Maybe could be from the makruh to haram, based on the harm. For example, trapping a cat. When I say trapping, I mean not letting it roam around freely. I don't mean starving it, because we know that's haram. But trapping a cat may probably be on the least level of harm. So the lightest karahiyah. And that trapping wild cats like lions and tigers and big cats, 100% haram. Whales in SeaWorld, 100% unlawful to do this stuff. Who allows you to do that? HF says, is Ash'arism equals Sunnism? We could say for sure Ash'ariya is one of the Sunni schools, but there's the Hanbali school, there is the Maturidi school, and there's the common Muslim who just doesn't have any school. He doesn't get involved in any of these things. But as schools of thought. What do you mean by no taqleed in Aqeedah? It means to believe in Allah and His Messenger, it has to come from yourself. You have to know that. You can't say, for example, I can say, is Prophet Isa returning? Yes, he's returning. How do you know that? All the ulama said so, and Aqeedah Tahawiyya mentions it. That's enough taqleed. I don't know the evidence a person can say of why Sayyidina Isa is returning, but so that's a secondary matter of Aqeedah. Doctrine. All of the matters of fiqh. Do you know what's the evidence that you should say tasbih in ruku'? No. Just my dad told me, my imam told me. That's all fine. But you cannot say, is Muhammad the last messenger? Is Muhammad a prophet? Yeah, the madhab says so. The scholars said so. That you can't do. So belief in Allah and His Messenger has to be coming from your heart. And that's why I believe people should study a lot to at least know how to defend that, to at least know why you believe. And it doesn't need to be an essay. It doesn't need to be formalized. No, because we see with the Sahaba and from the time of the Sahaba till now, the entirety of the Islamic history, common person has the personal belief that Allah is real, Muhammad is real, and can't put it pen to paper. So the scholar said, we do not demand that you be able to write an essay on it. That's not the demand. But you're not saying it out of following, imitation. You do believe that Allah is the creator, Muhammad is the prophet, regardless. Such that if your parent was to say, you know what, I'm changing religions, you wouldn't say, okay, I'll change with you because I'm a muqallid. You can't be a muqallid in those two things, right? That's the meaning of that. Okay, Iqbal Ahmed Noor, speaking as an Afghan who lived my entire life in Afghan. Taliban are an ethno-nationalist group with a religious cover. They really oppress women. Listen, the support for any group is conditional on principles. If you're correct, then if they're munafiqs and it's just an ethno-religious cover, then we'd be against them. If you're incorrect and they are sincere Muslims, just they have mistakes, maybe major blunders, then we can directionally be supportive of their intent and against the mistakes that they make or the totally wrong judgment calls that they make or policies that they have. We don't expect people to be perfect. So that's the answer. Everything is conditional support on principles. You can never go wrong. Can never go wrong. It's conditional on principles. And keep in mind, if your primary principles are sound, then we generally are supporting. If your secondary principles are way off, then we just don't support those, right? Those things we don't support. As opposed the opposite, let's say a completely atheist state, secular state comes up, props up, and treats people wonderfully, right? So, but in general, I can't support you. Yes, you're doing a lot of things, but in general, I can't support an atheist premise. So we're trying to navigate here and give everybody some basic principles and frameworks on how to view these groups. It cannot simply be yes or no. It can't be that. So we're going to have to go primary premises, your first order principles, and then your secondary principles, and then your application of those things. The hadith about angels not entering the house because dogs applies to me if I rent a basement and the landlord above me has a dog. No, it doesn't. You're responsible for what you're renting. Any advice on someone who's going to Umrah for the first time? The advice is sabr and not to be distracted by anything. And if you can possibly go to Masjid al-Fath on Wednesday between Dhuhr and Asr, spend the whole time there making dua. Masjid al-Fath is in Medina. And if you can possibly be in the Haram, rest up all day Thursday, just rest up, pray, come home, eat, sleep, then you're going to spend the whole night, like Ramadan. From Maghrib until Fajr of Yom al-Jum'ah. That time in the Haram, make your Umrah at that time if possible. If not, just make tawaf and stay there all night making dua because it is accepted. No, between Maghrib and Isha. Laylatul Jum'ah, the night before Jum'ah. Yeah, Thursday, what we would call Thursday night, in Arabic, the night of Friday. And the reason for that is that it's mujarrab. Firstly, the Prophet ﷺ, he said dua anywhere on the night of Jum'ah is accepted. The whole night. Dua is so elevated. It is a shame to not take advantage of this. And then on top of that, you're in the Haram. On top of that, you're making Umrah. And if not, tawaf. It's mujarrab. I have heard many, many, many stories of people. And I'm not saying they told me themselves. They're online. Stories of people complaining about issues for years. Then they go and they perform Umrah. And of course, these are Saudis who are capable of doing it. It's not much of a sacrifice of time or money. They like in Riyadh or in different cities, and they just drive down. And they take advantage of that. And they rest up on Thursday. Then they go and they spend all night from just like Ramadan night. Maghrib, as if it's the last 10 nights. Maghrib to Fajr. Little, maybe a cat nap here and there, some food here and there, bathroom break here and there. But otherwise, they're busy with different ibadat. And dua non-stop. And they have relief very quickly. It's mujarrab, tried and tested. The truth says, can you give us a word on the passing of Shaykh Hisham al-Kabbani? Yes, I did hear that news. May Allah give him all mercy and forgiveness and accept his good deeds and overlook anything else. Could you bring Sheikh Asrar to discuss? Yeah, he's coming Tuesday. Inshallah. Sheikh Asrar Rashid is coming to the live stream Tuesday to see his position on things. Trapping birds feels haram. Probably it is. Trapping birds. Also lions. Can you get Bilal Abdul Karim on your podcast? I can help connect you if needed. From Hamza E. Yes, we will accept to have him on the pod. Not accept, we would do it. We'll do it. So why don't you do that and send an email to info@safinasociety.org and let's make it happen. Why not? What is the main difference in Ashari and Athari? Says Omar Ali. Oh, we've gone over this a lot. I wish we had a clip to summarize that, but I don't know where it is. But I can't go into that right now. What's the difference between the Torah and the Talmud? The Torah is allegedly the first 5 books of the Bible. Pentateuch. The other books were allegedly from different prophets, or supposed to be from different prophets. The Talmud is like the scholarly encyclopedia of fatwa. It's fatwas. The Talmud has nothing to do with revelation. It's the fatwa, but they treat it as a sacred source because it's like their elders. But it's like centuries of scholarly debates. And that's where they get all the weird things that we would say is not part of the revelation. Very odd sayings in the Talmud and rulings. Can you do an episode on Khawaja Gharib Nawaz Mu'in Ad-Din Al-Chishti? Of course. I think we have one, but we'll do it. We can do one. Let's see some more questions here. What should someone do if they are ordered to pay court fees but can't do so without taking a ribawi loan? I think that you have to, at this point, inform the court of bankruptcy, right? And there may be financial aid. And maybe it's state by state. Why would you choose an opinion from after the Salaf when people in the Salaf dealt with the issues? The answer to it is only when they didn't deal with the issue. Or what's said about the Salaf is unclear. Or what's said about the Salaf is multiple different things, such that there is no consensus on it. So the other three Imams were not Asharis. The other three Imams also, even the what the Ashari Aqeedah was trying to do is answer questions that were not answered at those times. It's like fatwa on Bitcoin. I can't follow the Salaf on Bitcoin because that didn't exist at their time. It's the same concept. They're trying to answer questions that were not answered in the past. So what you're saying, embedded in what you're saying, is that the Imams, Abu Hanifa and Shafi'i and Malik, they all had the same exact masail in front of them as we do, and chose one route. Then we would have chosen that too, but they didn't have those masail in front of them. And secondly, who would know better about the Imams than their own disciples, than their own students? And what did the Hanafis choose? Overwhelmingly, with a consensus amongst them, the Aqeedah of Abu Mansur al-Maturidi, basically saying if Abu Hanifa was alive on his methodology, he'd do this. What did the Malikiya choose within one generation, 2 generations of scholars? They said if Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari was alive, if Malik was alive, he'd follow this. Based on his methodology, based on these new issues, that's what he'd follow. And even Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani had praised Ash'ari scholars, even if he himself had not come to that conclusion and studied from them, because maybe it hadn't spread that far. But what other example? You can only find 2 examples in the Maliki school, Ibn Abi Zayd and Ibn Abi Zayd and subhanallah. His name's skipping my. Why does a lot of names skipping my mind these days? There's too much stuff going on in my head. That's why. The Hadith scholar skipping my mind. So many names. There's so much stuff going on in my head these days that these simple things are skipping my mind. But otherwise, you have an overwhelming acceptance of those conclusions, basically saying if Malik, based on Malik's methodology, this is the way he would have gone on these new matters. Okay, the madhabs themselves, right? The madhabs themselves, where did they come from? It's basically saying if the Sahaba were alive, this is the madhab, this is what they would have done on this issue. The Sahaba themselves. Sayyidina Ali had to make ijtihadat in inheritance. So did Sayyidina Umar. They're basically saying if the Prophet was still alive, this is what we would go with. So the first and second and third generation of Imams after the 4 madhabs, the 3 Imams that you're mentioning, this is what they're saying. These new questions, if our Imam was alive, he would have made ijtihad with this. And the Shafi'iyya agreed with the Malikiyya, became Ash'ari. Yes.
I think often when I hear this question, it seems like it's framed sort of incorrectly. The right way to frame it would be, is this Aqeedah a logical extension of the foundation that's already there?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it a departure from it? It's
Correct.
not whether this was what was practiced by the early generations, because like you said, all of these questions didn't exist. So as long as this is the logical extension of that, then it fits within that framework. And so really you should be thinking about it from the framework perspective, not necessarily from the details perspective.
Correct.
The details didn't exist.
The details didn't exist. And when we say that there is a Shafi'i opinion on Bitcoin, clearly, obviously, Imam Shafi'i didn't comment on it, but when they say the Shafi'i, basically based on this method of reasoning and these principles, and that was given in Egypt. Shafi'i Mufti in Egypt said, and it's on YouTube, that Bitcoin cannot be lawful for us to trade in because according to us, you can't get your rights. There's like no government backing it. So if you were to be scammed in it, you can't get your rights. So they made the ruling based on the principle of crisis. Like if things go bad, what happens? And that's a methodology. There is a methodology of judging things that based on if things go bad, what would happen? The Malikiya said currency is what people agree is currency. If me and you wanted to agree that red balloons are a currency, they would be a currency, right? It's what people agree is a currency. Therefore, they didn't prohibit. So we do have Maliki ruling on Bitcoin, Shafi'i ruling on Bitcoin, right? And in a generation or two, you'll have a consensus develop and a minority opinion, majority opinion, etc. So it's the same thing here. In these questions of Aqeedah, and thank you for those who mentioned it's Ibn Abd al Barr. Yes, it's Ibn Abd al Barr. He takes from both. He didn't even seem to have a conclusion because you can find hardcore Ashari points in his books and hardcore Athari points in his books. So it seems that he didn't even take a conclusion. So he's not even a marja in Aqeedah in the Maliki school. If you look at the whole history of the Maliki school, they don't use him as a marja. I'm not saying he's not a marja. The ulama of the madhab are saying they don't treat him as a marja in aqaid. And anyway, regardless, I'm of the school of thought the Athariya is going to exist. The Ashari are going to exist. The Maturidiyya are going to exist. Every madhab is going to exist. This is what I believe is right, and I'm not about to have a war with anybody else. But I will continue to say, this is what we believe in, this is the aqeedah, and this is what is correct. And I know Shaykh Yasir Qadi's view is that they're all man-made. Yes, it's all ijtihad. Who said it's not ijtihad? But also what you say will also be ijtihad too. Right? They're all man-made. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not correct. Did not Allah use humans to preserve his religion? Right? Even the Quran itself, physically speaking, what do we see? We see tawatur in the preservation and human beings involved in the effort, but Allah guides it and ensures it. Same with Hadith. Bukhari is a human effort. Abu al-Hasan al-Ashari is a human effort. Imam al-Ghazali is a human effort. So the question is, who is most worthy of following? And given that they're human efforts, as we said earlier, we all should know what is ijtihadi and what is Islam. And with that, I'm agreeing with him. If it's ijtihadi, don't fight about it. You can say it, but don't have a fight about it. And I never started the fight. And it was other guys who misquoted me who picked the fight. And I'm not going to back down from a fight either. Keep the peace does not mean turn the other cheek and get smacked and get beaten up. No. I'm not going to back down if you pick the fight. But I'm not going to pick the fight. And I won't extend it either. I think that's a fair... So should I turn the other cheek? Should I extend it to the fact they're dragging the whole... No. There's got to be a middle way. Defend yourself once or twice and that's it. But I would highly recommend some of the Shabaab that are really caught up in this to realize that you're caught up in a matter that's really not even in the best interest of your Islamic upbringing. To study the Sharh of Tahawiyya, to learn from the classical scholars, reading from Nawawi, reading from Al-Ghazali, even reading from more contemporary ulama, learning. And people are gonna read everything. If someone's gonna say, why don't you just say Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Qayyim? Okay, yeah, read everything and you'll see where is the majority 100% agreement on and where's the differences. And continue to learn what's agreed upon. Okay. There was an earthquake in California? Oh, really? How bad was it? 7.0. A tsunami too? Should we go look at the news for that? Let's see. Let's see. Earthquake. Cali. Where was it? North or? Tsunami warning issued in Northern California after a 7.0 magnitude. Wow. Earthquake strikes off the coast. Tsunami warnings have been issued for nearly 5 million people in Northern California after 7.0 magnitude earthquake struck off the California coast. Okay, so the earthquake was off the coast, and that would cause a tsunami to stretch from Davenport, California, up to Douglas, Oregon, according to the National Tsunami Warning Center. This includes the San Francisco Bay Area and Eureka. So question for you. Wouldn't the tsunami wave be visible? Wouldn't it be visible? Like, we'll know where it is at every minute if you send a drone up there and look. Of course, we're not meteorologists, but I'm just assuming here. Tsunami activity could already be impacting coastlines, should reach San Francisco around noon. So they do know. They said it should reach San Fran around noon. Tsunami warnings mean that a tsunami with significant inundation is possible or already occurring. For those who don't know what a tsunami is when an earthquake happens in the ocean. Obviously, the massive amounts of water are going to be displaced and move onto land. So the worst one, I think, how many 100,000, 90,000? Indonesia killed 90,000. Crazy number. Tsunamis are a series of waves, dangerous, many hours after the earthquake. The first wave may not be the largest either. Unlike an earthquake where it's the big hit is the largest and then it decreases. Okay, so keep an eye out on that. Let's get back to a couple Q&A before we wrap up for the day. Can you speak about Islamic relief? I'll just give you a synopsis on Islamic relief, and this is going on this is going on his Facebook page, and I didn't look at his full assessment, or I didn't look at the entire policy of zakah, but there is a portion here of the zakah policy that is unacceptable in the four schools of thought. And what is that? Using zakah to underwrite a micro-lending scheme or funding a halfway house from money meant for freeing slaves. So they made a qiyas on the money used for freeing a slave to allow for micro-lending schemes and halfway house. And that would be unacceptable in the four madhabs because zakah must go cash to the person who receives it. So that's basically, and when you pay to free a slave, we have to look at the fiqh. Does that mean giving the money to the slave so he frees himself, or paying the master, the owner, to free the slave? Well, regardless, that's all that it would be. There's no analogy based upon that. And apparently that's the issue. Okay. So that's the issue, apparently. Yes.
A lot of these organizations that, not this specific one, I'm just saying generally, a lot of organizations will say zakat eligible.
Yeah.
But then if you actually look at some of the things that they do with the money, it just doesn't add up with the things we know are permissible for zakat, right? Now, again, I'm not a scholar, but there are certain things that are clearly outside of the bounds, and a lot of organizations will say zakat eligible to do it, like to host gatherings or to host events. They're using the money for that, and they're not separating between general donations and zakat money, and so it's very tricky.
People need to be very specific when you write a check of your zakah to the masjid. You need to label the envelope as zakah. And it's not just general charity. And I know people who live their entire life giving zakah as if it's charity. For example, I sat with some people who are elderly and they're nearing their 70s in age. And they said that their whole life, whenever they have some money, times are good, they just write a check for zakah. And they give it to the masjid. But that's not the right way to do zakah. Or they'll just send some money back home. But in that case, it does get to the rightful person. When you give charity to the masjid, they may use that to turn the lights on or to buy a new rug. None of that's zakah acceptable. Those aren't zakah recipients. So secondly, is Sharia requires you to count your money. Do you know how many people are wealthy? It's not so hard to get wealthy enough that you actually don't know how much money you have. I don't know, I got a bunch of money in Apple, I got a bunch of apartments here, and I got an apartment there, and I got an investment here, and this, half of this coffee shop I own, and I own 5% of that coffee shop, and that laundromat, and my brother's opened up a gas station, I just gave him $10,000, I don't know, I own 10% of that. So you actually have to know, I don't know, a bunch of gold, I got a couple accounts here, I got an account in the homeland, my brother's holding a couple thousand for me. One of the reasons circus of zakat is it forces you to count your money. You have to count your money. And then you have to calculate the right amount. And then you have to ensure that it gets to a zakat recipient. And when it comes to the amilina alayha, the administration, they're 1 out of the 8. The zakat distributors' salaries comes from zakat. But the lights, computers, the car, the gas comes from charity. So the building, zakat distribution building, comes from charity. But the salaries comes from zakat. As Shafi'i says, of all zakat collected, the admins can only take 1/8. So that means if our salaries come from zakah, only 1/8 in the Shafi'i school can come from zakah. But the Malikiya don't have a limit on that. They didn't observe a limit. So there's an ikhtilaf on that. But it's a nice rule, such that if we were to run a zakah operation or Islamic relief, whatever, and we collect $100 million of zakah. By the way, $100 million is not even a lot of money. You think it's a lot? It's not a lot of money. $100 million. 80 million. Let's say 80 million, just to keep it a round number. $80 million. Then $10 million can go to give salary to the whole group. If they want more money, they got to earn it somewhere else, right? Or maybe sadaqah can be given to them. If they say, my efforts collected $1 million, how can my salary be $50,000? Without me, you wouldn't have $1 million. Say, okay, makes sense. Deserves a good salary. But from zakah, you're not going to get more than 1/8. And we can disclose to other people that we're raising funds for salary. That's sadaqah. You can give or not give. Or if you're so smart, I would say, open a business if you're that smart, right? To be on the safe side, which is what I recommend every Islamic da'iyah, student of knowledge, scholar to do. Get yourself involved in another business so that you don't have to worry about the finances and getting rich from the dawah and from knowledge. You couldn't get rich from knowledge. I mean, I'm sure many booksellers are very rich. It's knowledge, right? Where he has to observe certain things. You can't sell certain books and you can't support other books. So translators, publishers, editors, just painstaking work. Authors, a person authors a book and sells it. And it's an amazing book. So there is a way to be wealthy, and it seems completely legitimate, right? Based on the value that you're offering. If you wrote a book on the Sirah, for example, and you spent 5 years of your life, a couple hours a day, you write this book, and you sell the book at a reasonable cost, and it's in Arabic, let's say, or Indonesian, where there's so many people live there, and a whole bunch of people, millions of people buy the book at a reasonable cost, and you're getting a sliver of that. You're probably going to get maybe, a percentage of that as a royalty. So you got really rich off of that. Now you're going to be tested. Are you going to change or not? You're going to be tested. Now the next book you write, are you thinking about what is the truth that Allah wants to be spread? Or what are the buyers going to buy? What are the people? So you're tested. It's a test. If you fail that test, it's very bad. So your money was lawful, but now you're tested. Contrast that, a guy who builds a building. It takes a lot of work to get zoning, to get permits, to build a building. Now you rent it out. Wonderful. Now you make a ton more money. Now with that money, you're also tested, but the test was much less, right? The test is much less Because if now I build a building to impress the customer, that's expected, right? That's expected. The test is very little. So that if a nightclub comes and says, hey, you're so good at building buildings, build me a building, a nightclub. You have to say no. But the test is, I would say, much more limited. Maybe his test is going to be a bank approaches him and says, you know how to make money. Here's a loan, right, with interest, a good interest rate. At that point, he's tested. But his test is far less because it's not in the deen. You screw up in the dunya, it's bad, but it's not going to be, you're not messing with the medicine in the hospital. The deen, knowledge of deen, is the medicine in the hospital. So Abd al Yahya said that everything good, bad, and I'm assuming he's meaning within the religion, it really stems from money in the religion. Doesn't mean money can't be in the religion. It has to be. Masajid have to keep the lights on. Scholars need endowments and stuff. But the question is, and there are certain things that are lawful. It's lawful to have a salary as a soldier. Fi sabilillah. Point being is that you don't, if you have an ambition to become wealthy, do it outside the deen. All right? Do it outside the deen. Because when you screw up, it's going to be a lot less. Yes.
How to be a student and to make money.
Mm-hmm.
You sort of one way to do it is have a trade or a skill where you can be on 100% for 6 months of the year, and then off 100% for 6 months of the year. So then you can.
That's a good point.
Make your money, and then
That's a good point.
study and focus just on your studies and your family and whatever else. And I think if you can do that, then you're completely self-sufficient. You've separated the two categories of things, and your mind is completely separate, so you can truly focus on both and be very good at both.
That's a great point. Is to be fully into making your money or fully into the deen. Pick one. And 6 months there, 6 months. That's a good idea. But
Cycles. Don't wait too long in between the two.
and not waiting too long because you get rusty. But the question becomes now, you have to have a profession. You have to be in the gig business, where I can take a 6 month gig or a 3 month gig, and usually probably maybe coding or something like that. Balancing dhikr and ilm for the student of knowledge, you should have awrad of sabah and masa and a hizb of Quran and a portion of salah on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that is within reason, within your daily routine. And Thursday night, you focus on salah on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let me tell you the other part for those doing Umrah or in the Haramain al-Sharifin or even here. If you want your dua accepted, about 30-40 minutes before the end of the day on Friday, before Maghrib, you try to devote some period of time for dua. It's a very special time. To be a recipient of zakat, the person should not have financial security for a year. Yeah. That's the least. Then there are 8 categories. But that's, in terms of the poor, that's what it is. Traveling in a car, bus, train, signify in a dream. Allah knows best. So some people means traveling through life, and Allah knows best. Allah knows best. I can't interpret it, but I can just tell you what some of the symbols mean. I have a friend in a relationship with an atheist. He can't gather the courage to break up with her, despite increasing a lot in piety in the past couple of years. How can he gather the courage? Okay, it's a good question. How do we gather the courage to do what's right and to make big sacrifices? The answer is, imagine you will meet Allah tomorrow. You may die. Right? Istash'ir 'azamat Allahi fi qalbik. Bring into feeling and into mind the greatness of Allah and that you will meet Him. Okay. You will meet Him tomorrow. You may die. Therefore, you need to cleanse your record before you die. And that's the best way to do it. And it's very tough. You got yourself into it. Now you got to find a way out of it. I'm enjoying the questions today. And let's do maybe one more question. You got a comment?
Yeah, my brother who has the atheist friend.
Yeah.
Surround himself with people who won't be accepting of it. It'll become much easier to extricate himself from that relationship.
Say again.
Surround yourself with friends who are not going to be accepting of that relationship.
Correct.
And so if you've got all these influences now pushing against what you're doing,
Yeah.
it'll make it much easier to exit. And they might also give you something in exchange. So you're going to have other companions who will fill that gap that's going to be left.
Listen, it's going to be painful. Your heart is tied with her. Her heart. You sort of also misled her too. You led her on. Listen, you screwed up. Taking the Band-Aid and getting things right is not going to be easy, right? Because you're going to have to hurt her pretty badly. You're going to be hurt because you like her, obviously. So why don't you propose to her, enter Islam, and we'll get married? That's one option. Propose and say, listen, think about it for the next period of time. I'll give you this much time, but this is where we need to go. I know you don't want to go here, but this is where I need to go. That's where, you could use this Gen Z language. This is the headspace that I'm at, right? That's where I'm at right now. I identify as a Muslim now, and I hope you can recognize my identity. And as a Muslim, I need you to also listen. If you became trans, in order for you and her to still be together, she's got to recognize trans people. So you need to tell her, listen, I now identify as a Muslim, and I need you to support me in that. Yeah. And I need you to support me in that, and then and be part of this thing, right? Ibn Abi Rayyan says, who cares about her feelings? But the thing is, you are human beings, though, and you do represent Islam, too. So the way that you got to do things is you have to have some mercy in the way. Did not the Prophet ﷺ said, when you kill in war, you don't torture somebody. You don't do 1,000 cuts until he bleeds out after 5 hours. You do one cut so he bleeds out in 5 seconds, right? Less than. With animals, we're told to do this. So I would say, tell her, I now identify as a Muslim. And I need you to, it only allows me to be involved with a Muslim or a Jew or a Christian, right? So become one of these, give it some thought, right? Give it some thought. And then slowly, maybe you stop doing the haram things that are the worst haram things, like khalwa, right? You would just maybe go slowly like that. And this is one potential. There is another way. If you see that this person is like way off and you were way off, because there's an atheist who's like a regular person, but there's also like an extreme, maybe you were part of an extremely vulgar or un-Islamic life. At that point, you may just cut it off regardless. That may be the safest thing. So you have two options there. And I would say, figure out what you're going to do and do that, right? But you definitely have to stop the forbidden things right away. Some guy says, why are the philosophical schools invalid in Islam? Because they contradict the textual evidence. And the Ashari and Maturidi schools came to argue against the philosophical schools, where they parted from the textual evidence of Quran and Hadith. Hence, the Ashari schools have philosophical language, because you are dealing with philosophers, right? If I have to refute an emotional pull, what am I going to use? Emotion. If a guy comes and he's emotionally manipulating people, I'm going to bring a better emotion. I'm not going to bring reason. I'm going to bring emotion. So these people brought philosophy. So the answer will be philosophical in nature, right? If nobody did this, then we'd leave these philosophers run rampant and cause fitna. Last question, is it in the Maliki school recommended to delay the Isha prayer? Not to the 1/3 mark of the night. Not past that. A lot of good questions, a lot of great We have more and more viewers every day. That's not the goal of the podcast, but it's nice to see, right? The goal of the podcast is that Allah's pleased with it. That's the goal. Some people said to me, listen, so-and-so does this to get views. I say, I will consider that, but my first filter, what would Allah and His Messenger love? And I'm not a mujtahid, so I have to see, what does scholarship say? And not even more than that, what would my teachers say? What would my own teachers say? And what would our elders in the community? Because that does reflect God's will. It reflects what Allah, God's will in Sharia. It reflects the Sharia for sure, right? So I don't really care for views, but I am happy to see the viewership rising. I can't deny that. It makes me happy to see that the influence is successful, and the clips that are cut are always getting better and better views too, right? And the latest clips about zoos. Hey, listen, PETA, what is it called? They're against eating animals. Are they against trapping them? They should be supporting me here. They should retweet it. Here, look at this. I'm wondering why I never see PETA around zoos. Subhanallah. So, but I have to say, we're not saying chickens, mules, these domesticable animals, chickens, mules, peacocks, petting zoos. That's halal. I hope I mentioned that in that clip, so no one thinks that that's not wrong. Petting zoos are lawful to have, right? But when you have a lion, that guy, he needs to run. He needs to hunt, right? He needs to hunt. Can you take a businessman and say, what do you do? He says, I run businesses and I earn $5 million a month in my businesses. Say, how about this? Stay home and I give you $5 million. You think he wants that? It's the gamesmanship of the business. Business is the sport of adults. At a certain point. At one point, it's your livelihood. At a certain point, it's the gamesmanship. After $25K a month, it's the gamesmanship of business. It's the challenge. It's why you wake up. Let's see if I could do this. Let's see if I can reach $1 million, $100K a month. It's the gamesmanship of it. Let's see if I can reach $1 million a month, right? You know what I'm about to say, right? $1 million a month. It's not that much money. It's not a lot of money if you think about it. You know how much money's in the world? $1 million a month. It's easy for Allah Ta'ala. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.